What's up, EC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel, and it's time for the much anticipated, long-awaited part 2 of my Judas Priest collection. I've been getting quite a few comments lately. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and then it gets pushed back for one reason or another. Part of the reason it's taking so long is I'm going back through and reviewing their whole catalog, giving each album a spin. Some of them I've given 2 spins. And just kind of enjoying the process. So let's just kind of, actually before we move on to the next set, which this video will be pretty much 80s Priest, I want to show one edition that I recently made, and that's Priest in the East, live in Japan. And this one, the difference between this and the US pressing, other than the name, is obviously it comes with 4 extra tracks on this 7-inch. Those tracks are Hellbent for Leather, Starbreaker, what are the other 2? Rock Forever and Delivering the Goods. And I mean, this thing sounds immaculate. I kind of got screwed, screwed myself actually, because I wasn't paying attention. I got this off of eBay for what I thought was a pretty good deal. It said on there that it was still in the shrink, and it was, but I didn't pay that close of attention because if you notice, there's something very important missing here, the Obi. And it was in the, it wasn't in the photos of the album. The album is in pretty much mint condition, but the fact that the Obi's not there kind of upsets me, and it's one of those things. It's something I'm usually real observant about, and for some reason I was just excited to see it for a good price and bought it. But the good price that I bought it for was if the Obi was there, so kind of upset about that, but whatever. So let's just kind of jump into where we left off, and that's going to be with one of the Priest's absolute classics, and it's going to be 1980s British Steel. British Steel was the introduction, brought the introduction of Dave Holland, who would be their band, their drummer for quite some time. At this point, it'll have been their longest run with a single drummer. This is their first album to go platinum, and this is really the one that brought Judas Priest out to the rest of the world. You know, a lot of that probably had to do with MTV that came out a couple years later. If I remember correctly, it was '82 when MTV came out, so this was still in heavy rotation at that time. And of course, you've got songs like Breaking the Law, Rapid Fire, Grinder, Living After Midnight, The Rage, Stealer. The Rage is actually my favorite song off of this album. But I mean, every song on this album is really just an absolute classic. And one thing I like about Priest is, especially 80s era Priest, you know, they still had their ballads on the songs, but even the ballads were really good rockers. I mean, it wasn't, you know, throughout the 80s, every hard rock and heavy metal band had to have a ballad on their album. And the difference was Priest's ballads still really sounded good. They didn't detract from the album in any way, and a lot of times that was the case. So, but again, just an absolute classic. And Dave Holland, by the way, wasn't new to drums. He played with trapeze all through the 70s, and we'll get to him a little bit later too, because there's. He hasn't had the best run since he left Judas Priest. Next up, we had Point of Entry. A lot of people were disappointed with this album. They definitely went more for the radio-friendly sound with this one. There were also 2 covers, a UK cover and then this is the US cover. I'm really not a fan of either one of them. This one's got the mountains in the background and this whole streak of old printer paper, you know, which I guess in '82 that was high, you know, that new printer paper was pretty cool, but not that cool. Heading Out on the Highway, Hot Rockin', and Sober Angels, or Solar Angels, sorry, are probably the best songs on this album. I really like all 3 of those. I really can't pick a favorite. This is probably, I don't want to say it's the least listened to Priest that I have in the collection, but I don't go to this one that often. But it was fun to go back and listen to it as part of this this whole video process that I'm doing for this collection. So next up is probably the absolute classic Judas Priest. When most people think of Judas Priest, this is the album they think of, and for great reason. I mean, it's an amazing album. it was by far it's been their most successful album. It went 2 times platinum. Again, just like British Steel, full of absolute classics. And that's 1992's Screamin' for Vengeance. I actually have a couple different versions. Sorry, my sinuses are going crazy right now, so I'm going to be messing with my nose a lot. First up, we've got the Screamin' for Vengeance picture disc. And this was from the 30th anniversary, so it would have been... they called it the 30th anniversary, but it was actually the 2013 record store day when they released it, as opposed to 2012, which would have marked the maybe they printed it earlier. I don't know. Regardless, it's a really good sounding picture disc, and the artwork. I mean, this is one of my favorite album covers of theirs. And then there's the back cover. So that's my first pressing of it. I've also got, this is just the regular first pressing, but the cool thing about this one is that this one is signed by KK Downing. I didn't get this signed. If I would have, it would have been signed on the front somewhere, but it was still cool. I got this album for really cheap, and it already had the signature on it. I didn't pay any extra for it. I want to say I paid $11 or $12 for this. So, and it's a really nice VG Plus condition first pressing. So, and then last but not least, my favorite pressing is the Mobile Fidelity pressing that was released last year. And these things sound just amazing. It's a gatefold with a really nice picture of the band, and then the lyrics on the inside. And I mean, this is one of those albums to list off the greatest or the best of this album will literally be to list the entire album. But I mean, you've got Electric Eye, you've got Bloodstone, Screamin' for Vengeance, you got Another Thing Coming, Fever, Devil's Child. I mean, they're all amazing songs. Bloodstone and Screaming for Vengeance are probably my favorites off of here, but not by much. I mean, seriously, every song on here is just amazing. Then we rolled into another just classic album. These are probably the third best from the 80s, but still just a killer album. This awesome album also went platinum. So an interesting fact about this is, of course, Defenders of the Faith, and this is a pressing that I got from Scott Waters. He hooked me up. This is one I had been looking for and just wasn't running across anywhere. So an interesting fact about this album that I wasn't aware of, this is the only album, other than their first, Rock-A-Rolla, where they've played every single song on this album live. You would think Screamin' for Vengeance or British Steel, that they would have played all the songs on that, but they haven't. And the only reason Rock-A-Rolla that they played all of those is because their first tour, that's the only songs they had to play, so they played the whole album. Now, I've also heard that they're going to be touring behind the recent repress of this, where they'll be doing the whole album as well, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting fact. And while we're on interesting facts, another thing that I read about that I never realized, there's actually no original members in Judas Priest. KK has been in the band for the longest, but he was a replacement. And I found that quite interesting as well, because I thought that KK was one of the founding members of the band, and he wasn't. He was brought in a couple years later. Everybody else fell away, and he turned it into the band that it is today. But and with the British or Defenders of the Faith, sorry, I also have a Japanese pressing of that one as well. Eventually, I'd like to get Japanese pressings of all of them. And then now we're going to roll into Turbo, probably most people's least favorite Judas Priest album. And there's probably good reason for that. I mean, this was definitely a different sound for them. So the story behind, and this one's a gold stamp promo, but the the basic album behind this was supposed to be a 2-album set. It was supposed to be called Twin Turbo. It was a mix of the more traditional sounding, heavier Judas Priest mixed with more commercial, radio friendly. It was supposed to be half and half, and I guess the record label pretty much put a kibosh that, and the record label basically said we're going to put out the commercial friendly songs, and that's what this was. They took all the commercial friendly songs, and that became Turbo. Yeah, the keyboards there, it just had that more AOR sound. There's still some great songs on here, don't get me wrong. Turbo Lover, Locked In, Parental Guidance, which was probably the biggest hit off of here. Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days, and Reckless. They're all really good songs. I really like Turbo Lover. I really like Wild Nights, Hot and Crazy Days. Probably my 2 favorite songs off of here. And this one still went platinum, you know? And a lot of that had to do with just the radio or the commercial sound, and the fact that a lot of people that bought this were buying it based on the 3 super hits that they had earlier in the 80s. So, and this one came out in '86. They also toured, obviously, for that album, and this was the results of that. They did Priest Live. This was recorded on the Turbo Tour. This is another interesting one. There's no songs from the 70s, which is crazy. No Hell Bent for Leather. None of that was on here, which just kind of blows me away. This one also signed by KK on the back. Again, I got this one for a really good deal. It was 11 or 12 bucks, you know. This is not near as good as this one, but it's still a good live album. And Priest does sound really good. And they do hit some of the classics on here, and they just, you know, it's just classic Priest. And then last but not least, the last one I'm going to show today. This is the last album of the 80s, and this is Ram It Down. This one was a little bit heavier than Turbo. Still not as good as early or as the early 80s Judas Priest, but a lot of that had to do with what the material was. So basically, 4 of the songs on here were leftovers from the Twin Turbo, what was supposed to be the Twin Turbo double album. And then this also saw the exit of Holland on drums. This whole album was basically done with drum machines. I guess Dave Holland was sick at the time, or had health issues, or whatever that means. I don't know if it was drugs or if he was actually sick, but he wasn't able to do any of the work on this, so they did everything with drum machines. And I mean, there's a couple good songs on here, but really nothing to jump up and down about. Probably the best, in my opinion, is Monsters of Rock. But Heavy Metal and Ram It Down are both decent songs as well. And also, going back to the Turbo sessions, 4 or 5 of the other songs that were supposed to be on that double LP have been released as the B-sides for a few of the remasters. Actually, we're listening to the remaster of Hell Bent for Leather, and each of the remasters had one additional song, and then one unreleased song and one live track. And 4 or 5 of the extra songs on the various albums were the leftovers from the Turbo. And then this one has the remake of Johnny Be Good, which they did for the Johnny Be Good movie soundtrack, which I really like that movie. Unfortunately, that song was just... they just shouldn't have done it. And if they did do it, that's fine, but they shouldn't have put it on their soundtrack. And to make things worse, they put it right in the middle of the B-side. And it just kind of throws off the balance of the album. I mean, maybe leave it at the end of the album if you're going to do that, but regardless. That's the last of the 80s. So the, part 3 will be from 1990, which was Painkiller, to Angel of Red, or not Angel, to the most recent album, which actually would have been the 10-inch that was released on Black Friday. So we'll talk about all of those in the next video. Speaking of Dave Holland, after Dave Holland left the band, he had done some stuff with various bands. He was scheduled to do some stuff with Tony Iommi before he was arrested. He ended up going to prison for attempted rape of one of his male students. You know, he still says he's innocent. He's still in jail. I don't know the whole story behind the whole thing, but that's basically what happened to Dave Holland. But like I said, the next video will be coming up. I'm not going to give you a time frame. Hopefully it won't take me as long as it took to get to part 2. But there you go, VC. I hope you dig it. Leave your comments. Tell me what you think. Tell me what your favorite album of the 80s is. And take care, VC.